Hello everyone, Curious Corduroy here, and today we're going to be checking out a video interview with the devs over at Sucker Punch as they talk more about Ghost of Yōtei. Now, we recently got that really excellent state of play gameplay deep dive for the game where the devs revealed quite a bit about the game, but subsequent interviews have come out where they've been elaborating a lot more on these mechanics and how they're going to work. And what's nice is this is a video interview, so we kind of get a proper idea of what the devs are really saying. You get way more than you would with a written article, and you just kind of get a better tone for what's going on with the game. So I'm really excited to check it out. That's what we're going to do in today's video. So this video comes to us from the folks over at VGC, who have a really great website, and they also have a YouTube channel where they spoke to the devs. I'll leave a link in the description down below if you'd like to check out the video without me talking over it. And of course, we've been covering quite a bit of Yotei within the past few weeks, so there might be some overlap with some of my previous videos. I'll try to keep that at a minimum or just ignore it altogether. Also, I'm wearing a hat. Yes, bad hair day. It happens. But let's get started on the video.
Ghost of Yōtei focuses on player freedom
so
more
good.
than any game Sucker Punch has ever made. But it's also a game that at its heart is inspired by so many of our favorite wandering samurai films. So let's start off by talking about exploration at the edge of Japan.
Hop on.
Following the recent State of Play broadcast, Sucker Punch's Jason Connell and Nate Fox sat down with me for a special episode of VGC the Video Game Podcast all about Ghost of Yōtei. We asked about Jin Sakai, comparisons to Assassin's Creed Shadows and historical accuracy.
Funny enough, I have zero input on Assassin's Creed. I'm just not an Assassin's Creed person. I tried to play the first one when I was younger. I played 30 minutes, stopped, never went back. So I don't really have any interest in the comparisons to Assassin's Creed.
And what motivated their change in open world philosophy.
First of all, it definitely is inspired by as creators of the last game, and played it a ton, and the amount of people that did play it, we certainly felt like that as we go to create a new game, and we decided it was going to be in Hokkaido, which and Ezo at the time period, this massively vast place that would only seem fitting a bit to also increase the way that we think about the freedom of the game, like what does it feel like to explore? Like, what are your options? How do we feed you your next sort of golden path? Like the vengeance quest.
Also, if you look at a map, modern day Hokkaido is really big. It's way bigger than the island of Tsushima. So there's going to be a lot more to explore in this game, assuming we get access to the entire land of modern day Hokkaido, what was Ezo. So that's pretty daunting, but also cool.
To us, it really felt like an evolutionary step for us to be able to think about what freedom means to the player, and to allow some new ways in which you might be able to uncover something that might be interesting for you. Like, if you're a player that is really motivated by story, it might be, you might be going down this path. But if you're a player that's super motivated by getting new weapons, slightly different path, right? They can converge, and that's great. And sometimes they're very close to each other, but really wanting to create a game that is fitting for the various types of play styles that comes with creating a game to this many people.
I like to do it all, especially in a game like Tsushima, which I spent quite a lot of time in. The moment something new popped up, I'm like, I gotta go do it. I was so in love with that world. I wanted to explore and come across new stuff. So also the way I play open world games is I try to do all of the side stuff that's available before I continue the main story. Kind of burns you out sometimes, but when you really love a game or a story, it doesn't really affect you too much. So that's kind of like how I structure it out. But it's cool that they're creating different pathways for people based on their play types, and I'm wondering if that was just stuff they researched with the first Tsushima, because I'm sure they have a ton of data from players of like, well, this person did this a lot, these people did this a lot, they took this kind of path. So it's kind of interesting how they do that stuff when it's the behind the scenes of how do we figure out the next game.
Open world games are unique in that they give power to players. And while we really work very hard to make a story that will stick with you and create senseis who will teach you new weapons that you can use to fight kind of classic samurai combat battles, want players to go after the sort of gameplay experience they want. But the thing that Jason and I love the most is that moment when you're on your horse and you're looking at this big, beautiful landscape. And maybe the wind is telling you, oh, if you would like to continue the story, go that way. But you see something out of the corner of your eye that catches your curiosity.
Yeah.
And you say, you know what, I'm going to go check that out.
Oh, yeah.
That moment where the game's not telling you really about where to go or what to do. It's you just deciding that you want to do that because you're curious. That is the most beautiful thing about open world games. And so Ghost of Yōtei is really built to harness and build as many of those curiosity and exciting moments as we can. Because for us, that's the moment when you're really and truly lost inside of the world, moving under your own power, and just wanting to find out what's over that hill because you've got a little hint of what's to come.
Excellent.
I did that so much in Tsushima. I would have my main path, because I used the map in Tsushima, but it was usually just to mark waypoints and just kind of get an idea of where I was. But I would be like, okay, like this is the next objective. I'll mark it. The wind will take me there. And every single time I did that, I came across something else that, piqued my interest, whether it was a fox that was going to lead me somewhere, or a golden bird, or, there was bandits attacking people or Mongols attacking people, or I saw something off in the distance like a shrine, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should just check that out really quick before I continue the main story. So I loved how they handled exploration in the first game, and they're going to do that again in the second game, but maybe make it a little bit more streamlined, which is something that we covered in a previous video where the developers spoke with Game Informer, and they talked about how they wanted to streamline the wind mechanic a little bit more, because in the first game, if you set a destination point on your map and you swiped up and the wind told you where to go, it just gave you one flat direction. So sometimes that direction would lead you to a mountain or some type of obstacle that would be in your way, and you'd have to figure out, okay, how do I get around this to get to where I need to be? So for Yotei, they said they're going to have the wind be a little bit more accurate and show you a proper path to get to your destination. I like both of those methods. On the one hand, it makes it easier to explore, so you're not really getting stuck in some spots. But I also really loved how in Tsushima, if I came across a mountain or something that was in my way, it forced me as the player to learn how to navigate the area that I was in. So if there was that big obstacle there, I couldn't just power through it, or the game didn't tell me where to go. I had to figure out on my own, okay, there's a mountain here, there's a rock path over here, maybe I can climb down this way. And that's such a cool way to learn how to navigate and explore the land and interact with the world. And inevitably, when I did that, I came across something else like a fox or a golden bird or something that I could do before I got to my main objective. So I'm cool with either way. I'm sure there'll still be moments where you might not even want to use the wind. You just explore on your own. So I'm cool with either one of those methods. But the player freedom and exploration is just so... It needs to change in open world games. A lot of times it becomes too checklisty, gets very boring. That was a huge criticism of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. Can you speak? Of how it felt too checklisty. Yes and no for me. There were moments where it's like, I kind of like that. I kind of like having a list of things I need to do because I will forget. I probably have ADHD, never been diagnosed. Probably have it. But then there were moments in that game where I was just able to not even look at my map, and I came across something new and I wanted to explore on my own. And I did that, and I discovered stuff on my own. So I'm hoping that, based on what we're learning about Yotei, I'm hoping that FF7 Remake Part 3 is kind of gives player the options of, if you want to use a map, you can, but we really are prioritizing player freedom and organic exploration, which the devs of 7 Remake Part 3 have already said they want to expand on player freedom, not just with combat, but how you explore the lands. So I'm pretty sure that'll happen.
I feel like these player-driven exploration games, such as Elden Ring, where you're given very little context and you kind of have to interpret the story, are becoming more popular. But I know Ghost of Tsushima was extremely popular with newer players and newcomers to the genre. Is this game going to accommodate those players as well? And how does that work in the context of
the Soul
Yotei
series,
6, the overarching storyline in the game?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things we love about Ghost is that there's a whole bunch of options to make it your experience, whether it's just settings for difficulty, which we'll get into the specifics of that later, but it's built off the success from the last game. As difficulty is an axis of sort of engagement and accessibility for people. And we like that we have this approachable, poetic, samurai-inspired cinema game. Like, that is not going away. And so the trick for us as creative directors and as designers and artists is to create a game that provides that extra level of freedom that we strive for, and for those players to enjoy. And some of that's simple, like create tools, like a new spyglass. Like, that's just a new tool that we didn't have in the last game. It's really simple, quick, and fast, and easy to use. But at the same time, we're never going to abandon that structure of story. You can't. It's very difficult to create a story with no structure. You
need the structure.
You're gonna have a middle. You're gonna have an ending. So,
and that's the thing that benefits Souls games, which I haven't played a Souls game in a while. I got really burned out on them. But Souls games don't really have a tight narrative. It's like, here's a very loose structure of what our story is. You can explore if you want. You want to watch the VOD video to get more details on a character or a landscape, go and do it. But they don't really give you big story stuff. It's mostly like, put it together yourself. So because there's no narrative structure there, as a player, you can go wherever the heck you want. You can do whatever you want. You can go to different zones at any given time. So that's not a consequence. But for these games, which are very heavy on the narrative, they're very story driven, you still need that connective tissue to keep the story going, because you don't have the runway or the leeway to be like, yeah, just do whatever, story's there if you want it or not. So that seems like something that'd be really hard to balance, but they did a really good job in the first game. I'm curious to see how they do it in Yotei.
While her journey is to hunt down the Yotei 6, and for sure in the opening of the game, or in the very opening kind of experience of the game, there will be some choices about which path you want to go to get things going. But by no means are we going to try to say, oh, all 6 you can kind of do in the order with no story structure. We just value story so much.
I'm glad they clarified that.
Without giving you all the details, it's a balance between ensuring that people have the approachable sort of game experience. They want to go to story. It'll be very sort of thoughtful for that type of experience. But if you want to go and hunt down and find some weapons and gear up and effectively level up, then there's a path for you in that world too.
Sucker Punch, we are huge fans of origin stories. In making Ghost of Yōtei, we wanted to create a new hero that players would get to know from the ground up as they evolved and changed and grew into who they were going to become as Ghost of Yōtei. Atsu's story of vengeance is a great jumping off point for so much more about how she interacts with the wilds of Ezo and the people she meets there during this really interesting time in history in Ezo itself.
During the broadcast, you showed off the new bounty system. I wanted to know, is that emergent gameplay? Can I find those enemies without having to look for the clues if I just come across them naturally? Or is it more structured? How does that element of it work?
One of my favorite new additions to the Ghost franchise is the bounties. I think they fit so well into the world. It's a bit of a lawless landscape. It feels a bit wild up here. And then here they are, these bounties that you can kind of rip off and go, and you get a last known position. So you kind of get a last known position, and then once you get to that last known position, you kind of have to figure out where they are from there.
Oh, okay, that's cool. All right, so yeah, a lot of times games will give you a bounty and they'll be like, go here, do the thing, you completed the objective, go collect your reward. This is cool. You gotta play a little bit of detective like you did in the first game. There would be areas where Jin would come across, a scene where something clearly happened, a fight broke out, and you'd have to piece together. It was very linear, but you had to piece together all of the clues you could to lead you to the right path to complete that objective. But this is cool. It's basically like, okay, they were last seen in this area, maybe fight some guys, interrogate the last one, get some more information. That's pretty cool. I like how they do that.
Great if you find the bounty first. That's awesome. But what if you're just exploring? We talked about different play styles, right? I didn't go to that town to go find missions or whatever. I went way off on the edges, and I'm riding around the foothills of Mount Yotei, and I come across that bounty. In most cases, those bounties will be there and they will exist. And you don't actually have to go and find that specific bounty poster to get that mission started. You can actually just go on your own free will as an explorer and come across this this, criminal or outlaw, whatever it might be that you're looking for, and happen to, find this person, and you'll quickly understand that it's a bounty, and then you can be able to get it. And that is trying to engage both types of players is a good example. And I quite like that type of experience because I'm a big wide player. I like to go, explore the whole world and see what I can find.
I also wanted...
Yeah, again, that's just so cool. To accommodate different play styles, again, there are the people that want that structure with the world map. They want to go to a bulletin board, and then they want to go and find their bounty. But like, if you're just randomly exploring and you come across one of these dudes and you take them out, that's super cool. You could kind of do that in Tsushima with the Ronin. When the Ronin were scattered across the island of Tsushima, you would just randomly come across them. And then you'd fight them, and it was so cool because it's like, holy crap, this wasn't on the map. I just found this Ronin standing there menacingly, and I fought him. That stuff is so wonderful. That's what makes emergent gameplay, to use developer speak. That's what makes these types of open world games so fun. It's like, I didn't get told to go there. I didn't get told who would or what would be there. I did it myself. I had sparks of that in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth with Gungaga. I got to the entrance of Gungaga. The game was saying, okay, go straight. And I'm like, but there's a path that way. I'm going to go this way. And I explored through the jungles of Gungaga. I came across a side quest on my own, got a new weapon for Barret. I felt cool. I'm like, I did that. The game didn't tell me. I did that myself. So I like that they're taking into consideration these playstyles and allowing people to do either or. You just happen to be out there and you come across a bounty, you can take care of it then and there instead of having it be super structured to the point where I got to go to a bulletin board. I love how they're evolving open world stuff. This is so cool.
To know you're building all of this bespoke content at obviously great cost, and we've talked a lot about in recent years in the games industry how much this stuff costs to make. As directors, do you feel comfortable letting players essentially ignore or perhaps miss a lot of this stuff because they want to forge their own path? Is there ever a temptation to force them down specific paths so that they're not missing great side characters, great side moments?
That is a really, really good question, and it plays into other things like RPGs, JRPGs. You look at the Final Fantasy series, Clair Obscur most recently. The older Final Fantasies in particular, and even modern day Final Fantasies to a degree, there's just stuff you're not going to see. There is stuff you're going to miss. There are so many side quests in Rebirth that I thought were phenomenal. They built up on the characters and the relationships, the world building. Some people just were never going to see that stuff. It sucks, but that's how it happens. And I think as a developer, I'm very curious to hear what they say, but I think as a developer, you just kind of have to be okay with the fact that you might have some really cool stuff in your game that people just are not going to see. A very, very small percentage are actually going to see it or complete it, but that's just kind of how it is. But it is kind of interesting to see how they would balance that with, budgets. Ballooning dev budgets are insane these days. We don't know what the budgets for a lot of these games are, but they're hundreds of millions of dollars, and they need to make a certain amount just to break even and then become profitable. So I'm curious to hear what they say.
That's such a great question.
It
Of course,
is.
When we make these anthology of side stories, all these little moments and big moments to encounter, we would hope players find them all, but the cost of freedom is that they might not find them all. And they might come at it this direction versus this direction. And it's worth it because we are, of course, game players, and we know that perfect moment where you feel like you've experienced something that no one else has.
That's so special.
In open world games where there's a collision of systems and story that make it very much your own. So all of us here at Sucker Punch are ready for players to potentially not see things that we've really put our hearts into, because for those that do find them, it's going to feel more special.
You've spoken a lot.
Yeah, even a game like Clair Obscur does have that to a degree. It is structured a lot like an old school PlayStation 1 Final Fantasy, but I feel like even then there still was more structure because of the world map. You could clearly see different areas. You could go to those areas, choose not to. So it was once you got into those areas, there were some branching paths that would have branching paths of their own that would lead to a hidden enemy or a hidden item that you might have missed out on. So just being okay with that as a developer and even as a player, like, I get it. There's that FOMO, that fear of missing out on something super cool. And that's just going to happen, man. Like, I think of older Final Fantasies, modern day Final Fantasies. There's stuff that I probably just missed on my first playthrough, even though I was being super thorough. But thinking of like the older games, like FF9, for example, doing like Chocobo Hot and Cold and coming across hidden enemies like Hades or like Ozma, it's like, whoa, like, how many people might have missed out on that? Like, a lot of players probably. But that's just something that comes with these types of games. But you got to be okay with it, because you do want the player to have that freedom and play as they really want. So I keep coming back to Final Fantasy VII Remake, but I think that's how that gameplay is going to end up being. I think they will give players choices. You can use the map if you want, but they still will have that organic exploration, that spontaneity. They've already hinted at it. Like, soon after Rebirth came out, they're like, yeah, we know players want that. And that series in particular, from Remake to Rebirth to Part 3, has been an evolution, where Remake was very linear, focused in Midgar, couldn't really go a lot of places. Rebirth opens it up to an open field type of game, which Naoki Hamaguchi, the game's director, refers to it as open field instead of open world, because it's not truly open world yet. Part 3, I think, will be the open world game that gives us the best of Final Fantasy VII Remake and the best of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, with a bunch of new stuff as well. So I'm excited. This is why I love video games. Press on.
What about how some of the more cliche checkbox open world elements will be removed or changed in some way for this game?
I love his accent.
Does that change how long the game's going to be? How would it compare,
Ooh, game length,
say, to a platinum trophy run of the first game, comparing to Yotei?
Talk to me.
We designed the game in mind with some of the similar numbers in terms of like scale and scope of the last experience. In that way, we actually found it to be quite satisfying, and there were some good numbers to jump off of. So we feel that the experience for playing through full playthrough of Ghost of Yōtei, whether you're like just ripping through the story, or you're somebody that likes to just go through the whole world and explore, or you're that hardcore platinum chaser, that it is a similar experience we expect in terms of the time commitment.
Ghost of Tsushima was released right at the end of the PlayStation 4
That's good to know.
generation, and then it was quickly ported to PlayStation 5. What were the lessons learned?
I don't have concrete numbers. I think Tsushima, if you were just doing the story stuff, was around 25 to 30 hours, which I think is the sweet spot for a lot of these games. But if you're doing extra stuff, which I was, you're going to be well into like the 60 plus range. And I think at the end of the day, because I jump back into Tsushima from time to time, I have almost 200 hours in that game of just pure exploration, story stuff, side quest. So to know that this is going to be very similar in terms of its length and structure, I think is great. Again, that is, you don't want to, overdo it with these games. Sometimes you really feel the runtime of these games, and it's like, okay, kind of feels like we're spinning our wheels. Maybe we can move a little bit faster now. But I think Tsushima came out, was it the end of June of the year it released, or the end of July? I think it was July. But either way, by the time I finished it, it was like the end of September. So I took my time with that game. I spent a lot of time just exploring. There were days I'd play and I wouldn't even do main story just because I was so enamored with the world. So I just remember the weather going from really nice when I started playing in the summer to like somewhat cold and rainy towards the end of September. So I put a lot of time into that game.
And that transition, now that you're making a game exclusively for the PlayStation 5?
It was such an incredible experience making Ghost of Tsushima for the PlayStation 4, and then pretty quickly seeing how that game showed up on the PlayStation 5.
Yeah.
The PlayStation 5 is, of course, an incredible piece of hardware, but let's face it, this controller's magnificent. I love the haptics. I love all of the way the touchscreen works.
I enjoy the haptics. I think it's cool when people utilize it. I think one of the only games that really truly utilizes, it's early in the morning, I'm sorry. One of the few PlayStation games that actually fully utilizes that controller and all of its features is Astrobot. Anytime you play through Astrobot, you're experiencing something on that controller, whether you're blowing into the microphone to move something, which is super fun, or you're tilting it as you're climbing something, or you feel the different textures in the controller as you're going through different like grass or sand or metal. I think Team Asobi are the only people that have done that. Although some of the stuff in Tsushima on the PS5 was cool. Feeling the controller vibration and the trigger pressure as you're like pulling something down, or as you're, riding your horse, the texture through the controller does feel different. So That stuff is cool. I don't like the controller in terms of how it feels. It's not a very comfortable controller for me personally to hold and play for long periods of time. I really, really, truly think the PlayStation 4 controller is like the ultimate controller. It's just so comfortable. It's not overly huge. It just kind of works. But they're working for Sony. They got to say some nice stuff.
Ghost of Yōtei is built from the ground up to use the PlayStation 5.
Okay.
To have those lightning fast loads, to be able to use the DualSense controller to, its maximum effect. And we learned a lot of lessons by seeing Ghost of Tsushima through the lens of that controller that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So it gave us a head start on how to make Yotei as PS5 friendly as possible.
I hope so.
And really to come alive through that controller, which I adore. And we could not have made this game without the PS5's features, which, we're very happy to be making a game exclusively, really targeted for this.
Don't hold it like that, you'll drop it. It is interesting because on the PS4, Sucker Punch is a studio that really just kind of, I think, maximizes the power of the console they're working with, PS4, PS5. Tsushima ran like butter on the PS4. Very few load times. In fact, there was an interview they did years ago where they said they had to, the load times in the game were so fast, they had to make them longer so people actually had time to read the tips on the loading screen, which is insane. But it's like instant when you need to go somewhere in that game. It's probably going to be the same on PS5, but again, I'm really curious to see how they utilize the controller, because I already know, like, they know what they're doing with the hardware. We've seen some of the crazy stuff they're doing with Atsu, where she can jump back and forth between modern day and the past where she's younger. That's only stuff you can do on a PS5. I don't think a PS4 would allow you to do that.
Some the pro enhanced stuff that we'll be talking about. We don't have the specifics that we've revealed just quite yet, but we're excited about being able to share some more of those details pretty soon.
Nice.
Another game set in Japan this year, extremely popular, was Assassin's Creed.
The Ass Creed.
And there was a lot of extremely heightened discourse, some in bad faith, obviously, about the game's historical accuracy.
Yeah, there was a lot of BS around Assassin's Creed. Like, even as someone who didn't play it, like, a lot of the complaints people had, I thought were really silly. A lot of it's rooted in, like, that really dumb, like, red pill stuff you see on the internet where people just want to complain and be mean a-holes all the time. But other than that, like, it looked cool. It was the first Assassin's Creed where I'm like, I actually kind of want to try that because it reminded me of Tsushima, but I'm just not really an Assassin's Creed type of person, so this doesn't really interest me. But I think they're talking a little bit more about like historical accuracy with Yotei and like Tsushima, because they do take elements of like actual history, like what they did with Tsushima and Jin and the Mongols, but they put their own little like sucker punch twist on it. Speak clearly.
For us,
I like that.
We want to make a piece of entertainment that can be for the whole world to enjoy. That's something that's a big goal for us, that is built off of our love for samurai cinema that we've shared, Nate and I both share, and many people in our studio share. And the only way to do that, as proved by Tsushima and now with Yotei, will be surrounding ourselves with advisors that understand that we're making entertainment. They understand that we're, in this case, working, a really strong piece of a work of fiction, and help us build a world that is respectful and thoughtful, and even take historical or geographical sort of elements from those regions or that time period and bring them forward to players of the whole world to experience. And again, the only way to do that is by having a multitude of different types of advisors to sort of guide us on our journey.
Yeah, and they did a really great job in Tsushima doing that. I remember when the game came out, there was interviews with Japanese developers saying how much they really loved Tsushima and how they were impressed with how accurate it was or how respectful it was. And I think there was a Japanese developer, I don't remember who it was, but they just straight up said, like, man, like, I'm kind of jealous that we didn't think of this. So they got a great path. And again, obviously with Sony, you got a lot of resources at your disposal to make sure that you're connected with the right people that can help you make a game that is obviously a work of fiction, but has layers and elements of realism that you want to portray as best as you possibly can.
When the game was first revealed, a lot of the fan base who have become very attached to Jin Sakai through PS4, PS5 and the Iki Island were disappointed that this wasn't a direct sequel starring
I have a
him.
black screen.
I wanted to know Was it ever at any point during development a direct sequel, or was this
okay.
origin story
This
and this different?
I think this is an editing error on VGC's part. I have a black screen, but clearly there is stuff coming up.
Time period, something that the team was pretty set on from the start.
We love Jin Sakai. We spent a lot of
They forgot their B-roll. It happens. I've done it before.
years bringing his story to life. But when we are going to start off on the long road to creating a sequel, we wanted to make something that we all at Sucker Punch got excited about. And we think that enthusiasm and love for building an origin story comes through for players being able to experiencing something very new as well. Atsu's story is very rich and a lot of unexpected things happen. And part of it is getting to know these new characters. So while we really love Jin Sakai and his story of letting go of his honor to become the ghost,
Great story.
we wanted to let players experience this new version of what it is to be a ghost in feudal Japan. This case being thought of as this kind of larger than life Onryo character that is kind of a walking legend in the far-reaching lands of Ezo.
And just finally,
Yeah, I love Jin. His story in the first game is so good because he starts off as such a strict samurai focused on honor, which is what the samurai did. But he quickly realizes, like, I got to do way more than I'm comfortable with if I'm going to beat the Mongols and, save our island. And it's kind of cool because it's not necessarily a fish out of water, but Jin comes obviously from that samurai background. But when he meets someone like Yuna, who is a thief, who has to do what she can to make ends meet, he starts to get a different perspective on the world while still maintaining the people that he grew up with and his other senseis, and like Lady Masako, was it Sensei Ishikawa, I think was the name. So he's getting all of these different worldviews and inputs that kind of form what his identity will become. And he very quickly realizes, like, I can't stick to this code of honor if we're going to do what needs to be done. And seeing that journey throughout the game where he turns more and more to like the assassin side, the thief side, to get these things done, I think was super fascinating. And that, spoiler alert, ending confrontation with him and his uncle, of like his uncle choosing to stick to the samurai code and the honor of, like, you're my nephew, but like, dude, I've been tasked with bringing you in because of the stuff you've done. And then you have that heartbreaking conversation of, like, you have no honor and you're a slave to it, which is brilliant. And then you got to fight, and then you get that choice at the end. What do? Do you kill your uncle, which is horrifying, but it's within like the lens of samurai and honor, what he would want? Or do you let him live and then you go into hiding? So Jin's story based on that is done. If you wanted to bring it back and repeat it, you could, because the Mongols do return sometime later to try and reclaim Tsushima again. But if you were to bring Jin back for that, it would be too much maybe of a retread of that same story. I'm sure they could find ways to freshen it up, but for the most part, Jin did what he needed to do. Now we're focusing on Atsu almost 300 years later. She's in a land that is very Wild Westy. These are, it's the land of Ezo, which is filled with a bunch of warriors who, after the Warring Peace period or the Warring Period of Peace, they've got nothing to do now. So they've all congregated to this one area. They're looking for work. They're going to do what they need to do to make ends meet. So it's this very lawlessness kind of vibe, and you see it in the lands. You hear it in the music. There's like some straight up Western cowboy Wild West vibes going on with the music and with Atsu. It's super cool. But to see how she's going to build her legend of becoming an Onryo and seeing it actually affect the gameplay and how you are going to interact with the world is very exciting, because they didn't really touch on that too much in Tsushima. Jin's legend obviously grew. He would come across people who, you would save, and they'd be like, oh, are you Jin Sakai? Like, you're the ghost. But it didn't have like a super massive effect. And with this one, it seems like they want it to be ingrained into the storytelling. So the more you do, the more you progress, the more you're going to maybe have an effect on the world and the people in it, which is super cool.
Only as we run out of time, the power fantasy in Ghost of Tsushima was an interesting one to me, because by the end of the game, each time I played it, I always felt extremely powerful, and that might be because I went and did everything before the final mission. But for a game where you're very much promoting that a player can explore their own way and do as much or as little of the open world content as they want, how do you manage Atsu's power, and what is the gameplay challenge going to feel like in this game compared to in Ghost of Tsushima?
It's a really, really thoughtful question. So with Atsu and her journey of vengeance and becoming sort of her own, legend within Eizo, she starts off from a position of this folk legend, the Onryo that Nate just mentioned. And obviously for a game, and we value progression so much in all of our games, and Nate and his team does such a good job with this, that you're going to be getting stronger. You're going to be getting new weapons, and you're going to be getting access to new abilities and people that teach you how to do new things, like weapon senseis give you new weapons. You might meet new people and train with them to get new abilities. And that's the power sort of climb, if you will, right? Like that's an important part of it. And for Atsu, without getting into the actual specific story details, starting off with this a bit more chaotic sort of Onryo inspired sort of kind of story, where she goes in her journey from this lone wolf to having her own wolf pack and people surrounding her in her life, will have to sort of it's like a journey of maybe even a little bit more maybe control, a little bit more sort of understanding those unique abilities and those weapons and those relationships and how important they might be to her life.
Thank you very much.
Okay, I think we're at the end here.
Nate and Jason for joining me.
I just want to elaborate on that a little bit more.
The video game podcast.
Yeah, so that's cool because these games, they're not like RPGs where in an RPG you level up, your stats actually change, you get more health, you get stronger, you get faster, you get more defense. You don't necessarily have that in a Tsushima or now a Yotei. So the upgrades, the power scaling really does come from your weapons. It comes from, in the first game, your stances, your side equipment, that kind of stuff. So I think that's cool because I think then requires the player to lean more on actual skill and like experience playing the game. Because it's not like I'm just going to strike down an enemy because I'm super powerful now and my strength stat is out of this world. It's like, no. That stuff stays relatively the same, except for your health. The health is really the only thing that grows in these games, in your resolve, which allows you to do other things. But I never really had too much of an issue with that in Tsushima because, again, it really came down to like how well I knew the controls, how well I knew the enemies, how good my reaction time would be to blocking or doing a perfect parry. So I think it's going to be the same with the weapons. Some weapons, I don't know if they're going to be stronger than others. They might have their own power scaling going on, but for the most part, I'm not really too worried about playing this game and being like, oh man, I'm way too powerful for this end game stuff. That happened to me and a lot of people with Clair Obscur. I got towards the end of that game and I'm either one-shotting enemies or taking enemies out in a couple of turns because it didn't feel like there was much of a challenge there. I'm like, I think I over-leveled and I didn't even mean to. I was just doing stuff as I came across it. So I don't think that's going to be an issue with the Ghost of Yōtei. It wasn't really an issue in Tsushima either. And then, of course, there's the difficulty modes. There was, I think, lethal mode is what it was called in Tsushima, which was kind of a double-edged sword because on the one hand, you could be struck down in one strike, but you could also take out enemies in one strike. So it kind of made it a little too easy. So if you're really good with the mechanics in that game and you didn't get hit a lot, lethal was actually kind of easy because you could just strike people down in one hit. So I found that hard mode was kind of like the best balance for me because it was challenging. I'd be surrounded. I would still take damage, but I'd still have to be pretty smart about how I played. So yeah, the power scaling, I think, won't be an issue in this game. You want to go and collect weapons and upgrades and all that. I don't think it's going to make you feel too overpowered. I think they probably have the right idea when it comes to balancing that stuff and how many enemies you come across. And I even think like the way that they're doing like the progression system with some of your unlocks, I don't think it's a situation where it's like, oh, now you have this new thing that's accessible on the skill tree. If I remember correctly, some of this stuff you actually have to go out and find in the world. So if there's a new ability or weapon attack, you might actually have to find an altar or a shrine to actually gain access to it. So that's a really cool way to motivate players to explore the world more. And it's not just simple, oh, you're at this point in the game, let's just give you this ability or weapon, whatnot. So that's pretty cool. But for the most part, this is a really, really great interview. I love how they're able to kind of dive a little bit more into the specifics of what they're going to do with the player freedom and the exploration in particular. But that was pretty fascinating. Again, I'll leave a link in the description down below to Ghost of Yōtei interview with VGC. I'm so excited for this game. It's coming out in October. I probably won't finish it until December. If it's anything like Tsushima, I'm really just going to take my time, have fun, explore, and just be lost in a really incredible world. With that being said, that's the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought of the interview. How excited are you for Ghost of Yōtei? Do you have any concerns? Are there things that you're excited about? Maybe there was something in Tsushima that you weren't too crazy about, but it looks like they're going to do it better. In Yōtei, let me know in the comments down below. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.